Very good evening to everyone. So glad we have a lot of people today, not just the Biome team. And so the today's topic for the session is our nuanced approaches mandatory for the sustainability of drinking water and sanitation schemes, learnings from the East India. And before I give the stage to Eklavya, I just thought I'll give a very short, brief intro about the what wash services are. So, wash services these crucial wash initiative was spearheaded by the World Health Organization, and WASH stands for Water, Sanitation, Hygiene, and aims to ensure safe drinking water, adequate sanitation, and a clean living environment for all. But shockingly, every year, inadequate WASH services result in 8 lakh deaths in low and middle income nations, and accounting for 60% of the diarrheal deaths. An astounding 4 lakh deaths of these arise due to poor sanitation. Moreover, lack of proper wash facilities is responsible for the almost preventable deaths of 3 lakh children under the age of 5. So these numbers are so huge. I realize how important this session is for us. And as of 2020, a staggering 2.2 billion people do not have access to reliable drinking water, and 4.2 billion lack safe sanitation. And the projection says if we do not address this crisis by 2025, half of the global population will have water stress issues. And these figures are very daunting, emphasizing that there is pressing need and significance to work on the WASH initiatives. So now I am super thrilled to introduce Mr. Eklavya Prasad, a dedicated social development expert with over 25 years of impactful service. His transformative efforts, especially in East India, Bihar, Jharkhand, have uplifted countless lives in areas like water, sanitation, and livelihood. A very brief intro to Sir. Since 2005, Eklavya has championed grassroots campaigns in North Bihar, focusing on alternative drinking water solutions and innovative farming approaches. He's a pioneer in areas like sustainable water technology, sanitation in flooding zones, groundwater management, and community development. As a managing trustee of Megh, Pyne Abhiyan, he introduced rainwater harvesting during floods in Bihar, which very positively impacted in many districts. His leadership has emphasized local collaboration, training, and innovation. He's excelled in his prior roles too, at the Center of Science and Environment, where he led significant community based water initiatives. His work has been very well acknowledged, including his exhibits like After the Flood and contributions to publications highlighting sanitation successes in Bihar. Eklavya's passion, innovation, and deep understanding of rural challenges, especially, make him an inspirational figure in social development. And we are so glad to have him with us today. So, yeah, Eklavya, the whole thing is yours.
Thank you, Ayushi, and many thanks to Biome for providing me with this platform. Uh, why do I say that it is important? Because when we tend to talk about drinking water and sanitation, uh, normally we have a very uniform approach. Whereas the area where I work, or the states where I work, specifically Bihar and Jharkhand, the scenarios are very different. And they are different also from the perspective of climate induced challenges. So, and we have been observing over the years that, the climate induced challenges are increasing. So, keeping the natural and the climate induced challenges, uh, the region is very special and very unique, which therefore is important to look at from the perspective of safe drinking water and safe sanitation. Now, a lot many people did ask me as to why am I really wanting to talk about nuanced approaches. At the time when we have a kind of an interaction or an idea about evolved sanitation scenarios in the country. Uh, and my response to them, and today also I'll be sharing the same, that of course, ever since SBMG came into being, uh, we have been seeing a lot of change as far as the presence and the status of state and central aided schemes with regard to sanitation. And it also translated into sanitation systems or facilities being available in the remotest of areas. And I have seen that both in Bihar and in Jharkhand. And the same stands for drinking water as well. So that is a huge departure from what the scenario used to be earlier. But my point of worry is that on one hand, we are ensuring that these facilities are available in the remotest of areas. And when I say remotest of areas, which also indicates that they are also available in areas which are either close to the urban centers or, are not as relatively as far off from these remote areas. So, which is in a way good. But coming back to the points that, what I'm scared of is because of the natural and the climate induced challenges, like for instance, floods, for instance, drought, uh, then in terms of river erosion, then in terms of groundwater depletion, and also groundwater contamination. Now, these factors they tend to bring in the whole. It changes the whole scenario. And what I mean by changing the whole scenario is that despite the infrastructure being there, they are dysfunctional. So, what worries me is despite the infrastructure being there, despite the access being there, the usage is not there. And therefore, there is a huge probability of slippages. Now, either people, when we talk in terms of sanitation, we have seen that there are trends where people are resorting to open defecation. And whereas, as far as drinking water is concerned, if the water is supplied is not proper, then people are going back to their old sources, which to a large extent would also be contaminated. So I wanted to share this in the beginning itself as to why is it important for us to look at the nuanced approaches when we talk about drinking water and sanitation. So this is my opening lines as far as the interaction goes today.
So, to everyone, that today the session is more of like a question answer session, we thought. And everyone, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any question at any point. And I have a list of few questions that I want to ask Eklavya. And we also have a few questions from the registered participants as well. But if you are here, you're feel free to just pitch in and ask your question. So the first question, which you almost did answer, but I would still go ahead and ask, is that why have you chosen to speak on this very elementary topic when the wash-related issues have been discussed seem to be so much more developed?
Exactly. I mean, we should not lose track of the fact that all of this is being done primarily to ensure access. And when I talk about access, I'm talking about access throughout the year, irrespective
Yes.
of the seasons, irrespective of the weather, irrespective of the challenges. Now, what happens is, even for people, they have actually, I'm now talking very specifically in terms of sanitation, for them to shift from open defecation to use of toilets was also a big shift, if you see from their perspective. It was not easy, but at that point of time, the environment which was created, the way SBMG was being implemented at that point of time, was extremely energetic. It brought in a lot of positivity, and therefore people also started getting involved. And there were various, strategies that were adopted to involve people. Now, this was, I mean, I would say, if we take the window from 2016 onwards, okay, till today. So there was a period when these toilets were being constructed, and thereafter some people started using it. But because of the fact that these toilets were constructed or the sanitation facilities were provided, not keeping in mind the local scenario, which today we see becoming the main reason for the dysfunctional toilets. Similarly, it stands as far with drinking water issues as well. So my concern is that, on one hand we should keep evolving the whole talk about safe water, the whole efforts to ensure safe water to people should continue. So also the same as far as sanitation is concerned. But we should not lose the emphasis or the focus that all of this was being done or has been done to ensure access. Now, if access is impeded, if access is something which uh, uh, is not featuring in the lives of people, especially in areas which are, as I had said earlier, which are challenged because of nature or, for that matter, even climate induced, then I think so we are heading towards a big problem. And it's only that I work in Bihar and Jharkhand, but the scenario remains the same as far as UP is concerned, largely eastern part of Uttar Pradesh. We have West Bengal facing a similar problem. We have Assam facing a similar problem. So there is a huge potential, huge group of people who are affected and who are now, existing without access to sanitation. And the same thing is being seen in the case of drinking water. So my point is, we should keep raising this basic issue so that we are able to address it. It's not about criticizing as to what has not happened, but it's also about, flagging the main issue so that we can go back and keep talking about it. And therefore, this whole issue of nuance and the basic concept of drinking water, safe drinking water, and accessible sanitation facilities.
So, yeah, now that we were talking about access, the next question is, what are the potential risks to wash infrastructure and services in the different areas where you have been working, such as Megh and Abhiyan work? So,
Uh, I would say that, like for instance, I mean, I'll have to divide it into. I'll be more nuanced in my answers, not being generic, because we are talking about nuanced approaches. So the first thing which we need to look at is the safety to the infrastructure that has been created, and infrastructure both in terms of toilets and also with regard to the pipeline and the taps. Now, uh, if we look at floods, now normally in Bihar, the floods come in the month of August, the first week of August, and stays on till about say end September. Now, for me personally, and also for Megh, Pyne, Abhiyan, we take floods not as a 2 month phenomenon. We consider floods as a 12-month phenomenon because you have different characteristics of floods: pre-floods, during floods, and post-floods.
mm,
Now, as far as sanitation is concerned, what floods does is that it impacts the infrastructure. And floods also impacts the infrastructure as far as drinking water is concerned. So for a period of say 3 months or 4 months, people just do not. I mean, at least for 2 months or say about 3 months, people are not able to access the toilets only because it's inaccessible because of floods. They're inundated. The same as with the drinking water pipeline as well. Post floods, what happens is these services are inaccessible because they have been damaged. So the first point for me in terms of potential risks is of infrastructure, and this significantly damages the whole wash facilities. It also tends to impact hygiene as well. And in your opening comments, you did mention so how critical hygiene is with regard to the survival. The second is also in terms of the social well-being. Second potential threat, because of the fact that the lack of drinking water and sanitation, it tends to impact humans, and especially in areas which encounter recurring floods and drought. Because in drought as well, uh, we have seen that the use of the sanitation facilities, they tend to get hit, and so does the drinking water as well. So I would bring in social well-being as well, and both in terms of infrastructure and social well-being, what we tend to see is that the productivity gets impacted. So for me, these are the three major potential risks in terms of the wash facilities, uh, and all, of course, including hygiene. And hygiene, as you said, that it leads to so many deaths. So for me, these are the four aspects: infrastructure, social well-being, productivity, and hygiene.
Yeah. So the next question is, based on your experience, can you share some insights on the adverse impacts of wash services due to weather and hydrological events? I mean, yeah, you were already speaking about floods, but yeah, so are you like, how are communities responding to these impacts? How is yeah.
Okay, so I'll take example of one of the villages from where we are working at the present moment. The name of the village is Neyatola Bishambarpur. This is just next to River Gandak in Paschim Champaran, West Champaran district. And we were trying to figure out uh, the responses of the individuals, of the households in this particular village with regard to drinking water and sanitation. So, coming to the point of sanitation first, uh, initially I remember when the toilets were being constructed, there was a lot of euphoria in the village, and especially amidst women and adolescent girls, because for them accessing toilets during floods is the most difficult engagement, and for them they thought that this is going to be of extreme help solving that problem. But as I mentioned earlier, that most of these works that have taken place, they have not actually considered the local scenario.
Mm.
And when I'm talking about floods, I must mention here that uh, Megh by Abhiyan has been working on this whole concept of typologies of floods. And we have seen that there are different kinds of floods across North Bihar.
Yeah.
So if we have to develop something, it is important and it is critical, and that is how we have been, dealing with drinking, with sanitation issues with regard to the floods. Now, when women and especially adolescent girls, when they confront a scenario where they are not able to access toilets when it is needed the most, that kind of brings in a sense of defeat and a sense of uselessness, that these infrastructures have been created not thinking in terms of access. And let me be clear that I'm talking about areas which are flood prone. Okay, but I have seen a similar scenario in Jharkhand as well, where there are no floods, but then access to water has been the biggest deterrent, and that to an extent has also led to uh, dysfunctional toilets. So I feel that I feel that the impacts on wash services because of these reasons has been acute, and it is important that we consider this as a learning from SBNG, and we also relate it to the present implementation of Jal Jeevan Mission or the state-aided drinking water supply scheme. Now, the other thing is also there. What I talked to you about is not is about the access to the toilets, but we need to also figure out that we should be talking about technologies that ensures that we are neither contaminating the land nor the water below it, and which is very important. Now, I'm not sure how much of thought has actually gone in, because, and why do I say it? Because everywhere that I see, we have a similar kind of a technology being implemented. And in different parts of within Bihar, I've seen it. Within Bihar and Jharkhand, I've seen the same technology. In the worst flood affected area and the most drought affected area, I'm seeing the same technology. So this is something which I think uh, is the narrative that we have been able to build only because of the fact that MPA has been working in this area for a very long time, and we have seen the evolution of the whole, the issue of drinking water and sanitation. So I think for me, these are the impacts on wash services, whether be it climatic or whether be it hydrogeological.
Suma, you had raised your hand. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. I'm not sure if this was answered. I was out in between, but I'll go ahead and ask. Or you might have a following question on this also. You were talking about the infrastructure and flooding, right? And inundation. Um, so what is uh, the difference that we can do in terms of infrastructure? We already have something, and in a city or even in a village, the population usually they are all in one space, and if inundation is happening in that space, and that's where the access also is required. So is there something that you have come up with, or is there some suggestions that you have worked on that you can
Right.
share?
Yes, surely. Uh, there are two. I'll answer your question in two parts. The first, which, as I've already mentioned earlier, that whenever we are working in a challenged region, whether be it from a disaster perspective, whether be it from hydrogeological perspective, whether be it from a climatic perspective, it is absolutely mandatory to include, to recognize, to acknowledge these challenges while planning. Because if you do not do that, then you would come up with something which is extremely generic. Now, I'll give you an example as to why am I saying this. Uh, we have been working on different aspects of groundwater security in North Bihar since 2007. And it was in 2008 that Megh Pyne Abhiyan was introduced to ecological sanitation by S. Vishwanath of Biome. And we thought that, and we were looking at ecological sanitation from a perspective of groundwater, securing the groundwater from bacteriological contamination. And it was in 2008-9 that we started working on it. Soon to realize that even to design a toilet, there are various aspects that needs to be, considered. And initially, when we started working on the sanitation infrastructure, we used to take 10 years of flood, timeline for 10 years, which used to give us the highest flood levels within the within the village. And soon we realized that this approach was not good, and we were faltering somewhere. And then what happened was we said, let's extend the timeline so that the probability of getting to know the highest flood levels is much more in the space of say 25 years. That was first that we did. Second, what we did was that wherever toilets were being constructed in the exact location, we used to also consider the highest flood levels in that particular area, so that the toilets that are being constructed, the ecological sanitation, which we call we have named it as Faidaman Shauchalaya. The English translation of it is beneficial toilet. And the fact is that now, uh, when we have in Nyatola Bishambarpur, I think so in the year 2021, it had the worst floods in last couple of decades. But because of the fact that we had taken a timeline of 25 years, when the floods came in, all the toilets that we had constructed were above the flood levels and people were able to access it. So, first thing was that we considered floods as a challenge and we planned our entire work around floods. And the second, that our approach was extremely nuanced. We not only talked about the highest flood levels in the village, but we also went around looking at the highest flood levels in areas where the toilets were being constructed. Because for us, the main issue was access and access throughout the year. So I think these were the two approaches. And second, what we also did was to ensure that the groundwater does not get contaminated. We promoted ecological sanitation, where everything is done above the ground. So we don't put the excreta or the urine below the ground. Though people did think that it is a foolish idea to promote in North Bihar, but we have proven that at present there are no other alternatives that have been practiced, and no other technology has been proven over the years with regard to sanitation in a challenged area. I hope I have answered your question, Suma.
Yes. So, if you don't mind me continuing,
Sure,
yeah.
sure.
So you say that yeah. I mean, it surely makes all the sense that whatever you have said. Um, in a sense, I'm not saying I'm for it, but just to understand how this whole thing goes. Uh, open defecation was something that we wanted to stop, and we have to some extent. Uh, but that was a good practice in a sense. There was no privacy for women and children. If that would have been considered, yeah, it hygienically it is not very safe with the population explosion. But that was a safer way when we look at groundwater contamination or even during floods. Is that something that we want to even say?
Are you saying that open defecation was a good practice in a flood prone area and from a
Um,
groundwater security and quality
not in
security?
a flood prone area, but in
Mhm.
terms of groundwater contamination.
Uh, I have a slightly different view. When we started working on sanitation, what we had realized that bacteriological contamination to groundwater was pretty high in areas where we were working in North Bihar. This could This was possibly because of both uh, human excreta and animal excreta being disposed. I would not take away this particular aspect, but yes, contamination was pretty pretty much out there. And the second thing is that if I don't know if you know that the northern Bihar part is heavily dense. It is, I think so, the second densely populated state in the country. So that also entails that if you're looking at open defecation vis-a-vis the amount and the impact on groundwater. So as far as shifting from open defecation to toilet, I think that was a positive move, and it did to an extent. All of us did believe that to a large extent it would save the groundwater from being contaminated. But also we have to realize here that the technology also tends to play an important role. And if we are not adopting the appropriate technology, then contamination might continue, or it might also get facilitated. So in Bihar's case, I think, if I'm not wrong, I think that the present technology uh, will, to a large extent, create problems as far as contaminating groundwater with bacteriological presence of bacteria.
Yeah, thank you. It was more of certain discussions that we used to keep having internally. So just wanted to put it out there.
Okay.
Yeah, Nilima, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask, I mean, there are so many questions that right now, since we spoke about technology, um, you're talking about, I mean, construction technology is one thing. What about the processing of the waste? I wanted to just understand like how that is being handled, because when the density also increases, that becomes also a problem to solve.
Uh, and the reality is that the remote areas, especially in North Bihar, that I have personally visited, and also my colleagues who have gone there. This is, managing the excreta in a twin leach pit is becoming a problem because of the fact that the access to those remote areas for managing the excreta is not really there. So what we see of honeysuckers in different parts of say Karnataka, we do have them in Bihar. I have seen a couple of them, but the numbers of honeysuckers that we require is not there. Now, this kind of leads to another question, to another complicated scenario in terms of that how are they being emptied. So is it also kind of leading to manual scavenging? Who are the people who are involved, and what is the process of that? I would The second thing also is in terms of, as we have to remember that that's a densely populated area or region in Bihar. Disposal becomes a problem as to if you have taken it out, where do you dispose it? And everyone knows that Bihar is a network of tributaries and rivers, so they tend to become the easy target for it to be emptied without anyone questioning it. So as of now, I think this particular aspect needs to be looked into. The second challenge is also in terms of the size of the septic tank. The size of the twin leach pit, which is causing problems. And because of that, also people have refrained from using it full time. So it's either that the toilets are being used on special occasion, or by, say, just the women of the household or the newlywed woman in the house, but it's not being used by everyone. That's largely from the fact that they still are not aware of the fact that how are they going to manage the street. So apart from infrastructure, yes, handling of human waste is another challenge in that. And therefore, we have been talking about the Paidaman Shauchalaya, the EcoSam, where we are kind of addressing a lot of issues in terms of access during floods. We are also talking about managing the human manure in a productive manner. We are talking about that manual scavenging is not happening. And it's also about how women and adolescent girls have access to these toilets throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Vishu, please.
Yeah. So, Eklavya, one of the interesting things that happens, and you've been party to that and witness to that. So, two specific questions. One, how have you found community conversations and community knowledge and wisdom to be internalized and then applied on the ground? What is the power of that in the projects that are generally taken? It's generally seen at a state level, right? But when you are implementing projects, it's all very specific to that particular locale, as was being pointed out in the answer to the question of Suman. So that's one part of the question. How important are those conversations? And how important is local wisdom and local knowledge? Second part is with Faidaman Sauchalaya and generally toilets in general. How has caste played itself out? Have you seen the role of caste? And if I've just to add, because you're from TIS, that of gender also. A bit of a reflection on caste and gender on both these aspects.
Okay. So, first question in terms of traditional knowledge, I'll give a couple of examples. One from Bihar, two from Bihar, and one from Jharkhand. Way back in, I think so it was around 2006, 7. We were working in Supol, and we were concentrating on on looking at different contaminants in groundwater impacting human lives. And that is the time when we were told by a senior citizen in a village about using of guava leaves for testing of uh, iron contamination in groundwater. Prior to that, our approach was very very mechanical because of the fact that we were just uh, using the FTKs, the field testing kits, but we did not have any element of local flavor to that. When we were taught by that gentleman how to use guava leaves, I think that brought in a new energy to the entire team, and it was just not restricted to Bihar. I mean, it went wide. I mean, I used it in Southeast Asia, in Bangladesh, to prove that this kind of knowledge does help. Now, how? Why did it? I mean,
You need to explain that a bit to perhaps some people who may not.
Yes, yes. Sorry. Okay. So this whole magic of guava leaves is such that you pluck fresh guava leaves and you crush it the way you crush tobacco, and then you put it in a glass. You put it in water which is in a glass, so that you could see the water inside the glass, and you put the crushed guava leaves in that water. And if there is contamination, if there is iron in water, it immediately starts changing color within seconds to different shades of purple. And we have come across scenarios where it tends to become so dark that it's as good as being black. Now, this was something which was alarming, because villagers somehow, they used to feel that the hand pump water was good. There was no problem. That just the fact that there was some level of stench in that water, which is okay for them. But then when they saw this, and we were using a technique which was told to us, or rather, a villager had taught us that, it brought in a very different flavor to our approach. Now, this actually became our entry point in all the villages, just to initiate a conversation. And it also helped us in getting and establishing conversation. Say, for instance, the whole idea of why Dug wells are important in arsenic affected belt of Bihar was we got to know it because we got into a conversation with people. They were not uh, they they were not speaking a language which we wanted, but they had their own language, their own expressions, which we had to understand. And finally, we did arrive at a conclusion that the reason why dug wells are famous or being used in those areas, largely because those are flood affected, I mean, arsenic affected belt in Bihar. The concept of breaking water was nothing. I mean, in Bihar, they say pani torna, that you break the water in the dug well. And this is nothing but oxidation of the water, which helps the iron and the arsenic to precipitate, and the water which you get is free of arsenic.
You have to explain that
So
again.
okay, so when what we did was we used to test the groundwater in dug well as well as in hand pump, and many instances we came across scenarios where the dug well water never had arsenic, but the hand pump water had arsenic, and they were accessing water from the same shallow aquifer. And this was something which we could not understand. So we reached out to people like Vishwanath and Manchu Kulkarni to figure out as to what is it. So they said that just observe what these people are doing. And when we went back to the villages, we used to see as to what they're trying to do. And their practice was that they used to throw a bucket inside the dug well. Then they used to swirl the dug well, pick up, pull the dug well water, I mean the bucket full of water, and then they used to leave it. I mean the bucket used to go and drop in the dug well again, and they used to do this kind of twice or thrice. So we asked them as to what you're trying to do. He said we are trying to make the water fresh. So this was their explanation. And later on, we realized that the reason why arsenic and iron is not available in dug well was largely because of the oxidation process. So that's the other thing. As I'll take an example from Bihar, from Jharkhand. Recently, we've been, working in a fluoride affected pocket in Dhanbad district, and there, in conversation with the community, we realized as to how people over the years have remained safe largely because they were trying to access water from the shallow aquifer. Now they did not have uh, knowledge about fluoride, but for them they defined that water to be safe enough because that was not having any impact. It was only when they started depending on sources that were uh, getting water from the deep aquifer is when these problems started coming in. It kind of surfaced. So it was interesting to see as to how the local knowledge. Now, I would mention again that if we go to the communities and if we try to have a conversation and we think that they would be speaking our language, that is not going to happen. It is extremely important to understand what they're trying to say and then decipher in terms of how and why they are saying what they are saying. To your second question, Vishwanath, in terms of the role of caste uh, and gender, when we were working on sanitation and especially Faidaman Swachalay, we made it a point to promote this at an individual household level. That was one. We never promoted it as a community toilet. And the reason why we did it was basically to stay away from the fact that this could have, caste-based ramification. And what we did was we developed this whole idea and we implemented in different caste pockets. Like for instance, in Nayatola Bishambarpur, there are different caste groups, and we tried it in all the caste groups there. And we kept monitoring in terms of who is handling the human manure, the decomposed human excreta. We make it a point to initiate the process by ourselves, involving the family rather than asking anyone else to come there and handle it. So the initial handling of the excreta tends to bring in that uh, comfort in saying that no, this is something which can be easily done. So this has been a regular practice. Now, as far as the gender issue is concerned, we have because of the fact that women are the apart from the elderlies and the children, women are the ones who actually experience floods in its entirety, pre, during, and post. So it became mandatory for us to include them, not only in terms of a decision, but also in terms of planning the entire construction of Vitamin Church. Though they were trying to, and they did it in consultation with their respective husbands who had migrated. But the major, for us, the major responsibility were of the women group members who had, agreed to do agreed to work on Faidaman Shauchale or adopt the Faidaman Shauchale. So what happened was that while we were engaging with them in a slightly more intense manner, in terms of not only the construction but its maintenance, its usage. So the message of a healthy use of Faidaman Shauchale, keeping women in central focus, started percolating. We also ensured that they had a huge stake in these toilets by linking them with, or rather, linking the toilets with the SHEs so that there were larger discussions. So, what we tried was we had a couple of toilets that got constructed as a demonstration, but these were the back end works that we were doing. And today, the scenario is that there are more women coming in that particular village and demanding Faidaman Shauchale after they have experienced as to what is the benefit. So I think it was extremely critical for us to engage women. One, because one, as I said, that they remain in the village throughout, so they understand the different problems at different point of time. And the second is that they are able to also come out with all solutions in terms of the problems that they are facing. So I think these were the two, and it really helped us. And we are evolving. It's not that we have reached a stage where we have addressed all. There are challenges with regard to interacting with women as well, which we are trying to address.
Thank you.
Yeah, so like we were speaking about women, and like we also have people with disabilities and a lot of other vulnerable groups. So how do risks associated with wash affect these group of people, and if you can share any examples?
Um, for us, as I said, toilet designing of toilet is very important, and we have always maintained that we float the concept.
Mhm.
And there are certain do's and don'ts while we are talking about the concept. And we do it with each and every family. It's not a unified or a uniform structure that we are talking about. So if you visit Neatola Bishambarpur, you'll see all the toilets that have been constructed are different because of the fact that they have been constructed keeping in mind the space, the requirement, the even the revenue or the capital that is available to the households. So, but then there are some certain do's and don'ts that we need to that we follow, and that is communicated. So while designing, we get to know as to whether the household has someone who's senior, has problems in terms of
Mobility.
access, mobility. So many a times, what we have done is we have worked around the staircase. So if you look at our previous designs that we did it in say 2009, 2010, and if you look at our present design, there's a huge shift. The shift is in terms of how do we make it accessible to children and even to the elderlies, and as well as people who have problems with mobility. So these are factors that come in only because of the fact that we are sitting with the community or with the household to plan it, and majority of the construction happens by the household. So there are no contractors there.
Mm.
Okay. So that also brings in a kind of a element of local planning or household based planning.
Janvi, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. So I have two questions actually. I'll ask you the first one because it's connected to the previous two questions. So I was wondering if this, because MPA has been so involved with the community, with the design, with every aspect of the implementation, if the state had to scale this up, do you think this would something similar some similar outcomes are possible, especially considering the way that they take on projects, they release budgets, and then they work on mission modes and they have targets and things like that. So do you think there's
Okay.
a way out?
Yeah. So let me mention it here very clearly that I've been talking about Nayatola Vishambarpur village in Paschim Champaran. The toilets that were constructed there were funded by, or rather supported by Lohiya Swachh Bihar Abhiyan. So for us, it was first of all LSBA accepted Faidaman Shauchalaya as an alternative sanitation technology for the flood prone areas. The second thing is that they not only provided money to the households, but they also linked them with SG, and there was a SHAN fund available within the SGs at that point of time, Sanitation and Hygiene Fund, which was also provided to the DDs for the construction, so that there was less burden on them as far as the capital is concerned. So and at that point of time, people who were involved in working, they had a huge, expectation, and they believed that Ecosan or Faidaman Shauchalaya would be an answer to the problems. And at that point of time, MPA did not have something substantive to prove while the project was being implemented. So we kept monitoring it and we finished off the construction in 2017, 2018. Since then, we have been monitoring the use, and that particular village has seen 4 floods, out of which 2 of them were really bad, and the access was there. So now we have a lot more confidence. We have a lot more content to go to the government and to promote Fireman Shauchalaya, and the process is on. And I think being a person who's horribly positive, that this would not only be adopted in Bihar, but potential of it being adopted in the other flood-prone areas in UP, West Bengal, Assam is also there. It's just that it needs to be advocated in a way that people do understand that alternatives like these, which have already proven its utility, its feasibility, needs to be scaled up. But I think yes, there are people in the government who are positive about it. We just need to see how it can be scaled up.
You had another question?
Yes, can I ask?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah. Thanks for that answer. So I had my other question is related specifically to West Champaran. So about 19 years back, when as a student intern, I happened to work there around Valmiki. In
Okay.
about, yeah, so I had the opportunity to do a survey of forest dependent communities in about 150 villages. This was over 2 months we did the survey, and one of the questions incidentally that we asked was about toilets, and in those 150 villages, not a single instance we found where people were using toilets. Even if they were constructed, which were very few, they were being used as storerooms, right? And so one is about that. How did you manage to change the mindset regarding using the toilets? I'm sorry if you already answered this question and if I missed it. The second question I want to ask is, we noticed that there was a lot of landlessness. Sometimes people just owned just the portion of just the small little house, sometimes as small as like 150 by 150, like a room sometimes. I mean, that's all they own sometimes. And what about families like that? How what kind of toilets did you construct for such households?
Okay. Answering to your first question, the area that you worked, if you follow the same path and if you move slightly towards the east, that is where we had worked as part of the participatory groundwater management program. And this was a village called Kairi, where Tharus were the predominant population staying there. And when we went to that village, there was hardly any toilet. And this was not a riverine flood prone village, it was a flash flood prone village. So there the challenge was that you had recurring floods. Now, in order to, and in 1 year you could get as much as about 40, 50 kind of floods, and which stays on for a couple of hours and then it goes away. But the impact is there because the velocity is pretty high uh, of the river water or the flood water. So for us, it was we wanted to start off by actually flagging the problems. So our approach has been that we tend to have intense interaction with the community, and the interaction is, as Vishwanath had asked me that question in terms of conversation, and conversations that happen in such a scenario, you cannot think or cannot plan it by that you'll finish it off within 2 days or 3 days. You have to just let it flow, because that is when you'll one tends to get ideas in terms of how we should be working in this particular. What are the ways in which we can tap people? What are the ways in which we can utilize their insights? And who are the people whom we can connect with? So I think for us, the interactions, the conversations were the which acted as a magic wand, and it really helped us. And once people were articulating their problems, somewhere down the line they were also talking about sanitation. So it was, and because our entire mandate was groundwater security, so it was on us as to how we could, you know, convince them about the problem and how we could go our, together. So there we saw that yes, there was a change in mindset. People did, and believe you me, that access and assured access is something which everyone looks for. And if you assure them, and if they experience themselves that this kind of a toilet facility provides access, definitely it has a ripple effect in the community. The same thing happened in Nyatola Bishambarpur as well. We started off with 8 toilets. Today there are more people, almost 15 of them asking for it, because over the years they have seen. So it's the initial hitch. The other thing which we also did was we ensured that communities which had used Faidaman Shauchalaya and those who were planning to, we had an interaction with them which was not moderated by any of Megh Pyne Abhiyan team members. So it that also helped. I mean, they had all sorts of questions. We till date we do not know what questions did they ask and what were the responses. But the end of the day, when they all came back to their village, they were confident of going ahead and utilizing. So that was one. As far as landless people are concerned, yes, this was a challenge and it remains a challenge. And for that, we had initiated work with the district administration in Paschim Champaran with a very active uh, uh, district magistrate. Unfortunately, he was transferred, and after that, we could not take it ahead. But as of now, if you look at it, the government of Bihar, they are trying to address this issue by constructing dedicated community toilets. So each household kind of has access to a particular unit, and that is how they're trying to address the problem. But my entire thing is, if such innovative thoughts are going in construction of toilets, why not consider the floods as a major problem which will not allow people to actually access these toilets, even if they are constructed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. So, to what extent can training communities, like in different geographical areas, on climate resilience, like especially right now where everything seems so uncertain, uh, how does it help address the impact of climate change on wash services?
I will just add another angle to this question. Uh, I would, along with community, I would also talk about practitioners.
Mhm.
We have our own, set of thoughts, values, perceptions, observations about climate and its impact on such communities. We need to get trained in order to understand as to what exactly is being articulated at the grassroots with regard to the impact. And the articulation has to come from the community.
Mm.
And why do I say it? I mean, today, MPA has been talking about typologies of floods, which I mentioned earlier. We got this idea only because of the fact that we were able to sit and we tried to listen to what different floods were there in different parts where we were working under the participatory groundwater management program. It is only when we understood the different types of floods in that particular entire North Bihar region, and we are still doing it. It's not that we have finalized the whole thing. We're still doing it, and it is only when we have understood is that we are coming out with solutions. I mean, we really bungled pretty badly earlier because for us, floods was a uniform entity,
Mm.
and then we realized that we failed miserably. So I would suggest that wherever, whosoever plans or is working at the grassroots in a region which is flood affected, uh, they need to first get trained in terms of how to understand that place. Like for instance, this year, majority of the flood prone areas in Bihar are actually going through a drought like situation.
Mm.
And I was in this village on the 27th of July conversing with the women there, and they were talking about challenges. And the challenges were that till now they have, I mean, it's rare, but during Kharif, that people were using pump sets to irrigate their land, basically utilizing groundwater through pumps for irrigation, which is unheard of in the area where Nyatola Bishambarpur is located. And they said that, the way things are, maybe there'll be a massive downpour in upper catchment area and we all will be flooded, destroying our entire crop. And this was 27th of July. And on 9th of August, this exactly happened. Now, my point is, if we wouldn't have spoken to them, the trends as to how community also keeps trends and what are their ways of, addressing or rather predicting problems.
Mm.
And now, these are something which are very basic, but then basics do help a lot. And we have our own ways of approaching the problem, which we should continue to do that at our end. But how do we extract information? How do we extract knowledge from people who are living those problems is something very important. So I think yes, uh, for us it is important that we work in such a way that we gather information and try to develop our own understanding, and that is how we get trained in terms of then developing ways of training people with what we are trying to do. So normally training is something that we go in with our own baggage, We go in with our own understanding, and we try to tell them, which for them is Farsi. They don't. They won't be able to comprehend unless and until we create a content from their content. This is what I want.
Makes sense. Yeah. So the next question is, what are the essential non-negotiable policy benchmarks which are established or need to get established for making all wash infrastructure climate resilient and sustainable?
I would start off by saying that we should not feel shy, or we should not feel bad, or we should not hold ourselves back to accept that problems have happened.
Mm.
Because if we don't do that, we will never improve. We will continue doing the same thing. Ultimately, what will happen? The core of sanitation and drinking water will not get addressed. We might have thousands and thousands of toilets and kilometers of pipeline. It will not be of any help. So it is important to accept that certain things have gone wrong, which is okay, and it needs to be. I won't use the word retrofitting, because this word is slightly dicey. Because when we talk about retrofitting, then we talk about retrofitting of the retrofitted, and the change continues. Here I'm talking about sitting down and trying to understand as to where the problem is, why is the problem, and trying to come up with a solution which actually addresses those problems. The numbers are huge, but so is the problem. As I have been saying, UP, Bihar, Bengal, Assam, these major 4 states. We can also bring in Odisha, because Odisha also has similar floods. And these days, floods are happening in places which were famous for drought.
Yes.
Have you thought about that? No, we have not. So it is, and we tend to, I just don't know why we just do not acknowledge the fact that in 12 months, for 4 months, people do not have access to sanitation. For 4 to 5 months, people do not have access to the services that we have provided to them under the objective, or for the objective of safe life. It's not happening. So for me, the most important thing is to acknowledge the problem, and also to see as to how they can be addressed. Right now, there is a gap which is growing. And the first question that you asked me, why are we talking about this basic nuanced approach when the issue has evolved and we are looking at much complicated and much, issues which are at a higher level than just talking about toilets per se, or pipelines and taps. But for me, I'll keep on raising this issue because this is extremely critical. If you do not have access, nothing else would matter at all. So I think the policy, or for that matter, the policy makers, or for that matter, people, the professionals who are involved, for that matter, the institutions that are involved with WASH, they need to take a step back and see as to where the problem is, and they need to address it. Otherwise, we'll continue talking about plus and plus plus and plus plus plus, whereas the sans plus would be still languishing without being effective. So my problem, and this is what I have been seeing in both Bihar and Jharkhand. So in that kind of a scenario, how do you go and even talk about SBMG plus, or the other strategies that you're talking about? It'll remain disconnected. So I think For me, it is acknowledge the problem and address it appropriately. And then only we will be able to say that, yes, we have been able to look into the problem and come up with an appropriate solution. Sorry.
But, so like you were talking that you guys used to, see only 10 years of data, and then you moved to 25 years of data. So how do you think can we better generate data and evidence to monitor climate risks in terms of future modifications to these infrastructures, like the existing infrastructures?
Um, um, I have been talking a lot about Bihar. Let me bring in some examples from Jharkhand. Recently, Megh Abhiyan has been involved in looking at the shallow aquifer management program in urban in Dhanbad Municipal Corporation. Now, when we started working on this project, the major thing which was told to me, or rather the main thing which was told to me, was that Dhanbad municipal areas within Dhanbad Municipal Corporation, they largely depend on pipeline and deep aquifers. So there is no need to even look at shallow aquifers.
Mhm.
And shallow aquifers is not going to be of any help. Now, this was the predominant narrative.
Mhm.
Rest, what happened was, despite knowing that this is the fact which has been related to us, we went around the entire municipal 35 wards out of 55 in Dhanbad Municipal Corporation area to understand the scenario. And it was the input that was coming from. Uh, am I being audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the input that came in from our field visit was that we went to almost around 108 locations, and about 65% of that 108 locations, we were able to prove that the communities around the communities were able to exist only because of dug wells and shallow water. The entire dynamics of shallow aquifers was made to they made us understand. So, and which are the years where the aquifers have, I mean, where the groundwater has depleted, which are the years where they have been good. They were the ones who told us the connection between rainfall and shallow aquifers getting recharged. Now, how did this happen is again the fact, and again the basic thing, against the nuanced approach of trying to hear what people have to say, rather than trying to prove as to what we knew. And that actually helped us to develop specific plans for those areas which were challenged.
Mhm.
So my point is that it might sound very basic for many, but for me it is still very extremely crucial. There is no way that we can have an understanding of all the areas where we try to work.
True. Yeah.
And we should not also attempt to bring in this whole feeling that we know everything and we just go there and we have a magic wand and because of which we can come up with solutions. I think so. Conversations also brings in this whole aspect that communities that are existing, they have sufficient information that needs to be capitalized or they need to be used. Somehow we are moving away from it. The way the processes are, the way our approach has been, the way we are running behind outputs and outcomes, it is not providing that space of the knowledge that is existing today. So I think when we talk about resilience, when we're talking about being prepared for anything that is going to happen in the near future, they are the best people to advise us as to what should be, because they have seen such phases in their lives.
Mm.
And when, like for instance, I gave you the example from Bihar as to how that Didi in the village was actually telling us that, if you have a drought-like scenario, how
Mm.
in the future we can also have a scenario where where the village is in a drought-like situation but is also flooded. So I think for me it is, and for MPA it is extremely critical, and this has become a kind of a phase. I mean, kind of guideline for us, irrespective of the fact uh, whether it takes time or not. That we generate knowledge from people. That is what is going to tell us about the future.
Ranjit, please, you can unmute and ask the question. It's very interesting.
Yeah. So, Eklavya earlier talked about how government has, at least they have created it as an alternative sanitation technology. But I am just wondering at what level they are ready to accept it or implement it across the state. Not everywhere, but wherever it is suitable. Like he was saying, it is suitable in floodplains. So, has there been any effort from Pyne Abhiyan, and what the government has uh, responded to it? Because the technology itself is very interesting. Like in trains, there was earlier there were toilet. Train is kind of running toilet, but we have implemented that bio toilets, and now the tracks are safe, and it is kind of not creating that nuisance along the tracks. So, in that way, how the government is responding to this, because this is very important, especially for floodplains.
Uh, Thank you, Ranjit, for the question. Yes, uh, we have been working along with the government since 2016, and the whole approach is that it is not make Pines Abhiyan's capability to scale it up at the state level. And this approach has been from the very beginning that we need to inform and also prove that this technology is feasible, and the government needs to take it up. So now we have, as I said earlier, we have sufficient content. We are far more confident, and we have a lot to prove that this technology can be scaled up. We have also have worked in different flood typologies to prove that this technology is relevant in across the flood typologies in Bihar. Now the question comes in as far as how the government is responding. Uh, till now, we have been working with different levels, and there is a positive response from the government. But there are challenges as well, and these challenges tend to impede the entire effort going in as far as and going in towards scaling up of the appropriate technologies, just like Faidam and Shauchalaya. So, and these challenges come in from levels which at times is easy to overcome, at times it's extremely difficult. But what is required is that we continue to do it, and only then that the government would be able to take it up. We need to be persuasive. So for us, the biggest win to start with was the fact that government actually supported the Faidaman Shauchalayas in Nyatola Bishambarpur. Now, from there on, when we have seen the success of it, we are now engaging with the state government, trying to talk about it. That let's take other places where we can execute this. So the efforts are on, and I am positive that soon we will be looking at government-funded Faidaman Shauchalayas being constructed in different parts. The other thing is that there are a lot of fear for such toilets, and these are fears that people who are in position at times, either for advocacy or to push for an alternative technology. They create it on their own without actually uh, confirming or reconfirming whether that creation is a reality or not. We tend to come across such challenges a lot. So to convince them that their thought process is not that correct is another challenge, and that consumes a lot of time. So yeah, I mean, working with or convincing the government is just not working with the government. It's also about working with various other agencies and groups that are working around, which are around the government systems. So, and they do have a say. So I think yes, it's a challenge to convince, but as I said, we are at it. We have not given, though we have seen a lot of uh, unsuccessful attempts, but we have not given up.
Yeah, so I think I am mostly done with my questions. So if there are any questions from others, please feel free to unmute yourself. And otherwise, we had some questions which I think came in the registration form that we sent across. So I'll just read out. One of the questions you have already spoken. One is very generic, but I'll still read it out. It says, how does water management work in rural areas? This is like a whole textbook.
In a way, interesting also because
Yeah.
the I have a very different take on this.
Mhm.
Let me share this. Some of the participants might like it, some of them won't. But still, let me play the devil's advocate here. My whole take on water management is that initially, or rather earlier, people were close to the resource.
Mhm.
Okay, so whether it's surface water or whether it's groundwater, they were very close to it. They had an interaction. They would they would talk with these resources, right? They could see these resources. Dug well, so you could see the Pyne.
Yeah.
Surface water, of course, you could see. So, and they could actually create a good uh, balance between use and and recharge or slowly the whole idea started coming in of convenience.
Mm.
So there was a shift. Though people had uh, individual access to groundwater, say for instance hand pump. So from dug wells, which was largely community, we came to hand pumps, which were largely individual, and you still had access to groundwater, but you did not see the groundwater. That was only about abstraction. Only when the water came in that you could see that it's coming from there. And people started they started exercising their right to groundwater below their hand pump, which was not the case when we were looking at dug well. Dug well was a common pool resource. And now the communities have been far removed, further removed. Now their access is through taps. So I'm not, and there's no judgment. I'm just telling the process in which how water management, drinking water management, I would rather say, rather than water management. That's a much larger issue. But drinking water is being managed. So now you have a tap in rural areas, and whatever is being supplied to you is something which you believe that is of good quality. Whereas when you look at dug wells, uh, in North Bihar, there were festivals which were around water bodies and dug wells, and they used to clean. So there was a collective which used to clean. I mean, they were involved in cleaning of dug wells. So I think somehow usage is being promoted, responsibility or responsible uh, uh, connect to the resource is decreasing. I would say that's my take on how it has.
Yeah. Vishu, do you want to say something? Deepak?
It's a question, yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead, Deepak. Unmute yourself.
Namaste. I
Namaste.
want to, the challenge in so many of these projects we do is always the community mobilization. So how do you, and it's a challenge because every 100 kilometers, the way people think, the way the tribes think, the way we work with some of the tribes in Nagaland and other places. So similar, the issues are similar all over the country. So how do we, is there any, I know interaction is the best mode, and start talking to them, get friendly with them. So that's the only way. I'm just asking, like, what kind of challenges and generally, what do you all think, will work for community mobilization? So that's the challenge we find actually.
I did touch upon this issue earlier in my talk, but I would. It's good that you brought this up front. Uh, for us, we have seen both phases, uh, and these two phases were based on our own approach. So there was a time that we thought that we were listening to the community, but we were actually not. We were pretending to listen, but we were there to communicate our own intent, our own mandate, which we thought that, oh, this is the way we should be doing. And we fell flat on our faces. Uh, the second one was realizing that no, what we did earlier was wrong. And we actually got into the fact of, you know, understanding from them. And here, what we had done, this it was a strategy. What we did was we have always had local people working as in the team. Always, there's hardly been. It's a couple of years back we had professionals from TISS. Uh, Apart from that, and we had a social anthropologist also. But apart from that, the entire team has always been from local people. So now that is very interesting because the local people, when they come onto a team, they feel empowered and they think whatever, they know everything. So for us to control these minds were also another challenge, but we did it. And our point was, let us not go there with our own ideas to translate to people, but to get what. And it was very easy to figure out as to who's trying to put in their own ideas and who are the people who are trying to bring in newer thoughts. Once we started doing that, Deepak, believe you me that it was a huge difference. Even if we were working in adjoining villages, scenarios were very different. And that is what got us the strength to say things which we are saying today. The fact that we whenever MPA gets an opportunity, we do talk about typologies of floods because this was told to us by the people, and they have their own reasons for saying that. So our my point here is that irrespective of the differences, this is what is going to is going to impact, nothing else, because of the fact that uh, unless and until we understand the nuanced issues in a village, we will never be able to address them. Never. And I think slowly we need to go back to that particular way of working. We need to be persuasive. Groups need to be persuasive. We cannot whitewash the whole thing from this. I mean, we can't paint the whole issue with the same brush. So I think that is what our experience has been, and this is what we are trying to continue with,
So
though it
so
brings in
what
a lot of challenges.
what you're trying to say is when we do a project plan, keep the first 10-15% of project time to listen, or 20% of the time to listen to what they have to say, and
Exactly.
really, like, address. And along with that, we may get to know some other issues which are so critical to them that which can be solved as part of our project as well. So, and
Mm.
we just, like, club both, and they are also happy and they'll participate.
Mm.
I'll give an example here, Deepak, that when we were doing the participatory groundwater management program, we were working in same district, same 5 districts where we were working earlier, but in different locations. We had kept 4 months, the whole 4 months, just to understand the community. I mean, I'm not saying that at the end of the 4 months we were able to understand the community, but we got to know far more than what we did earlier. And it was all about just going and talking to people, and it was also a kind of a value system that MPA was building within the organization. That every time you go and sit with people, you don't have to give sermons to people. Listen, let them talk, and you listen and you note. So I think that, yes, that kind of helps a lot.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? Otherwise, there's also a very, okay, I'll just read it out, a very generic sentence. So it says that for community awareness on quality features of drinking water, use words CATS, where C stands for clean and clear, A means alkaline, T denotes taste of water, and S is for sterile, no bacterial contamination. So, Eklavya sir, please comment. Thank you.
Very interesting. Let me counter this with, this is what C what
ATS, that's,
CATS.
yeah.
Okay, so way back in 2000, November 2006. Okay, that was the period where MPA was still not able to figure out whether we should only be promoting temporary rainwater harvesting in the flood prone areas, or we should, or what should we do? Should we just only talk about temporary rainwater harvesting during floods? We went to a village wherever we had worked earlier to get their inputs. And I was, the people in that village defined water through aesthetics. Now उनके पास जाकर ये हम CATS बताएंगे. I mean, I'm sorry, whosoever has, I'm not, but the fact is, I mean, they were telling me about the taste. How do they, what taste, color, feel, and smell. This is how water was described to me. And this is, and their description was, this is what the water should be, and this is what the water is. Therefore, you start work on water throughout the year rather than just during the floods. So, again, what I'm trying to say here is issues like alkaline and all, maybe this is for a very niche group of people. But otherwise, people who have been drinking, they have their own ways, and then the best is to understand their definition and create a new one along with them.
So, yeah, I am, I think, done with all the set of questions. Anyone else?
No, thanks, Ayushi. I think we're sort of getting into time. And one of the interesting things for this has been the slow conversation. We've lost the ability for listening to slow conversations or just sort of pontificating about it. Thank you, Eklavya, for
Very true.
adding on. And the other thing is that there's no PPT. So that's also another blessing, because Eklavya uses a very good camera. Therefore, he has a very good PPT. Otherwise, his talk is very meaningful. And Ayushi, thanks for moderating it excellently. And you
Yes.
did a very good job with getting questions from outside and with people also. So it's also very important that moderators switch on their video so that Eklavya is not talking to a wall, but to some person in general, right? So, and so it's been very enriching, and I hope Eklavya is as much a part of Biome, or Biome is as much a part of MPA. We don't see each other as different. So it's just we are their southern wing, or they are our northern wing, as you have it. So
Eastern.
Eastern wing, right? So thanks, thanks to both of you for this, and thanks to the wonderful questions that came from everybody, including all of you, everybody, and who asked on those cats and dogs approach. Also, it's also fascinating that there is those kind of insights which are brought in, and so thanks, wonderful.
Thanks a
Thank you
lot.
so much to all of you for giving us giving Megh, Pyne, Abhiyan the platform to talk about things which we strongly believe in. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much.